This is your host, Tia. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Top 10 Live Geek Vibes Nation. Geek Vibes Nation. The Top 10. The Top 10.
Alright, I think that is good. So, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another amazing episode of the Top 10 by Geek Vibes Nation. As always, I'm your host, Tia, and this morning I am going to be candid with you guys and say that this was a bit odd. My wonderful co-host, Brittany, and I are testing out a new platform to record our podcast. So hopefully everything is actually recording and it's good. But Brittany, wasn't it a bit weird not hearing the top 10 intro before this?
We have to do it. Top 10. Geek Five. Wait, how's it go again? Wait, do it, Tia.
This is your host, Tia. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Top 10 Live Geek Vibes Nation. Nation.
I don't know why I was in the top 10, but yes, nation. Yes, thank you. I feel like I'm at peace again.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, it was very, very strange to me, but I mean, hey, it is what it is, right? You know, in order to make progress, we have to move forward.
Sacrifices must be made.
Okay, wait, did you see on, Geek Vibes Nation's Twitter page what Kanan posted up in regards to Kim Jong-un's death?
No, I didn't, but is it verified now? Because I know there was like a lot of things that were like, yes, it happened, no, it happened, back and forth.
It is verified, and Kanan, so like TMZ reported it, and TMZ is usually really good with reporting the deaths of like famous figures. They're always the ones. So he retweeted their post and put Thanos like as destiny is fulfilled.
Oh my god. I love it.
And if anyone listening out there is offended by that, I don't care. He was a tyrant. So hashtag sorry, not sorry. But
just say sorry, not sorry. I was like waiting for it, and I was like, yep.
And by the way, Brittany, this is really good that we're talking about Kim Jong-un because the top 10 this morning is the top 10 worst villains in comic book, movies, and TV shows. And when I say worst, because Brittany actually asked me this morning, she's like, do you mean that they're like bad, like, like very villainy? And it's like, no, I'm not talking like, because if you were doing like, that is what I would say is the top 10 like best villains, right? Because they're so bad, and obviously Thanos would be like, say on the top of that. No, I'm talking about the worst villains. Like they weren't executed properly. Their motives were really shit, and they were just so boring, right? Like those type of villains. They were presented as the villain, and you're like, oh, this is awful. This is like the worst villain. That's what I mean.
The only reason you did worse villains, the only reason you did that and not best villains was because you didn't want me to throw Hannibal up on that list again.
I really think, though, Brittany, that we've done the top 10 best villains in, like, movies and stuff. I have to look back, but I feel like we've done that already. Unless we just did superhero-like stuff, and then we can go back and do regular movies, which, yes, yours would absolutely be Hannibal. I have no doubt.
I mean, are you calling me predictable?
Yes.
But I guess you could say that kind of assumption would be justified.
Justified. I had that, what is it from, where it's like, Are you calling me a liar? Well, I ain't calling you a truther. Oh, Drake and Josh. There you go.
Oh my god, it's so funny that you just said that. I was thinking about that quote yesterday because at work, like somebody says something like, "Are you calling me a liar?" And I instantly thought, "Well, I ain't calling you a truther."
I absolutely love it. Oh my god.
And mind link.
What did you say?
I said me and you have like a mind link.
I would hope so. We've been friends for quite a number of years, so, that's just what happens. So before we head into the top 10 list, do you have anything exciting that's happened recently that you would like to share? Because you did tell me something really exciting before we even started the podcast.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I was one follower away from 900 followers, and it's been really wild because I think I can't remember if I'm at the end of my 6 months or I'm officially at my 7 months of streaming, but it's been something else. It's been exciting. I've had so much fun with it. I got a lot of new streaming stuff coming in that I'm like a chronic shipping checker, which especially with everything going on is even rougher because you're like, okay, I understand that things are slow, but mama needs her stuff now. Mama needs stuff now. But that was really exciting. I'm loving it. I got embarrassed the other day because there's a bigger streamer that does channel reviews to show how to improve, and he's like, okay, we've checked this out, let me go to your top clips of all time, and it was that freaking furry hentai explained one, and I'm instantly like, no, 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 and he sits there and he just stands up and starts clapping. He goes, this is the best clip I've ever seen while reviewing. He said, hats off to you. That was amazing. And I was sweating. Because that when I get nervous, I start pouring sweat. I would be bad at poker.
Yeah, definitely don't ever bring Brittany to a poker game. No, but hey, that is awesome, though. That is definitely awesome. I would say that probably the most exciting thing that's happened to me in the past few days is that I got a new phone. And on top... What did you say?
You didn't tell me you got a new phone. I feel betrayed.
I got a new phone because so for anyone out there, I have Boost Mobile, okay? It's cheaper. I'm paying $45 a month while you all are paying fucking $150 a month. So I don't feel bad. You can make fun how you want. But I had the LG Stylo 3, and I've had it for a year, all that, and freaking, it was getting really slow. It didn't have a lot of things on it, so I got the LG Stylo 5, and I love it. It's so nice, very updated, looks great. It handles really well. But to me, what's the most exciting thing about it is I was able to download Quibi, and on my other phone, Quibi was not compatible. I literally looked up and I went to go download it, and it's sorry, this isn't compatible to your phone. And I was like, god damn it. So this phone,
that's an old phone.
Yeah, exactly. So this phone, I was able to download Quibi, and I swear to God, we're not sponsored by this. I'm just really excited to tell everyone that it is a short-form streaming service that right now is just for your phone. They are making an option that you can update and you can cast it to your TV, but right now it's just for your phone. And it has all these shows, and the shows are seriously at max each episode 8 minutes long. They're very short but very good. I have watched Most Dangerous Game, which is amazing, and it made me realize hey, we should pay attention to Liam Hemsworth. I know we all fawn over Chris Hemsworth because he's Thor, but Liam Hemsworth is, he's not bad. He's not bad. But Most Dangerous Game, definitely awesome. The Stranger was scary as hell, and I'm just watching Survive now. So Brittany, even for you, which I know you spend a lot of time on your phone and you are really busy, so you don't have a whole lot of time to sit down and watch, say, a 13-episode season where every episode is an hour long. Seriously, these episodes are 8 minutes at most. So a 15-episode show like Most Dangerous Game is like, what, an hour? And that's it, practically. So I'm just saying, and they're doing a 90-day free trial right now. So you should definitely check it out.
Oh man, and like I need my waltz. I'm gonna have to go on there just for him, like just to see him in action.
Well, yes, so Christoph Waltz is also in Most Dangerous Game, and he is fantastic. Him and Liam Hemsworth work so well off of each other. Yeah, Brittany, I'm going to hold you to it because there really is no reason for you not to download this app. You could literally just lay in bed and watch on your phone and watch like just an hour's worth of like a full season story arc. So yeah. Anyway, I know I'm like getting off track there just because I just watched it yesterday and I was really happy about it. But we are doing the top 10 worst villains in comic book movies and TV shows. Before we go any further, I have a message from a friend of the podcast, which is our friends over at The Main Damie. And they'd like to highlight their D&D podcast called Stranger Damies. So, Stranger Damies is the ongoing real play D&D podcast from the Main Damie family of podcasts. Make sure to join them every Wednesday as the wild stallions traverse the many traps and tribulations that Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has to throw in their path. There's elves, weird half-dragon people, conspiracies to uncover, and more references to the 1980s than Ready Player One. Subscribe to the podcast on all podcast services by searching Stranger Damies, and make sure to follow them on Twitter and Instagram at Stranger Damies. And of course, Stranger Damies is also a proud member of Geek Vibes Nation, and you can always find us at geekvibesnation.com. So, Brittany, we are ready. Start us off. What is your number 10 for our top 10 worst villains in comic book movies and TV shows?
You ever have like where you're like, man, I really love all my picks, but I don't know really where to begin, right?
Well, we always say that this list isn't, in any particular order.
Okay, really quick, I have trouble pronouncing his name, but from Doctor Strange, what was it? Calicious?
Oh, yes, Mads Mikkelsen's character, correct?
Yes. And my reason for that is that he felt like such a stepping stone. Like, when I look back at that movie, I felt like he was literally only there to give a conflict. Like, he wasn't fleshed out. Normally, like, when we have a villain, right? Mm-hmm. We kind of have some kind of fleshed out history to them, or we have a way, like, the best villains are the ones that we feel like we can relate to, whether it's Loki and feeling like, left out, abandoned, or playing second fiddle to a sibling, you can relate to him. Or you can relate to, say, Yellow Jacket, feeling like he's constantly in the shadow of another person, right? But with him, it was like you saw him for literally 5 seconds, right? I don't even remember like a big fight scene with him. You more of have like a situation with his goons more than anything else. And, they refer to him, like, all I know about him is that he was smart, right? He was smart. He wanted to, he felt like nothing should be off limits of what you can learn. And he brought back a, like, interdimensional, like, space demon thing. Like, whatever he was. But he was very forgettable. Not particularly that he was bad or Mads Mikkelsen was bad at portraying him. It was that he literally had no flesh to him. He was like a skeleton of a villain. There was like, hey, we're there, we're fighting. Oh, he raised up this monster. But more of like when I think back and look, I go, man, okay, we had Doctor Strange, we had his, he got his hands, destroyed. He's learning. You hear like a slight mention, but you don't truly see like full on interaction with him until the end, and then he's defeated, and then you're done.
You know what villain Mads Mikkelsen was good at portraying?
Hannibal.
Hannibal. I got it on the list for you.
Thank you. That's everything I needed in life. I still need to finish the TV show. I remember when I started it, and you were like, okay, I finished all of like season 1 and almost season 2, and I was like, oh man, I'm still on episode 3, and you were like, what?
I know. I was like, I watched this specifically for you, Brittany, and you haven't even kept up with it. But I completely agree. So the thing is, like, I say this all the time. When I first saw Doctor Strange, the movie, I was very underwhelmed. It could have just been how I was feeling that night or the theater experience, but didn't like it, I liked Benedict Cumberbatch as Stephen Strange, but the movie itself. But after watching Infinity War and seeing how huge of a role Doctor Strange had, I went back and then watched Doctor Strange, and it was freaking, like, so good. Then I really liked it, but I liked it for the purpose of I liked Stephen Strange's character and all of that. You're right. His villain wasn't really anything. It's crazy that it was such a huge actor considering how mundane the role was. Like, he was, okay, do you remember Kung Fu Panda?
Yes, I love Kung Fu Panda.
So wasn't the whole thing that the villain was formerly a student and then kind of went rogue and all of that? And I think that was essentially the same thing where his character was a former student who went rogue. Like, he was a great student and could have been the best, but he, his dark ways got a hold of him. But I will say...
Is Doctor Strange just a highbrow version of Kung Fu Panda?
It might be. It might be. You have a newcomer in.
So happy.
So, you had Mads Mikkelsen. He was just okay. And I will say, though, my favorite thing, though, was his death, because it never makes sense to me when you have these villains who want to resurrect this huge being that will bring death upon everyone, and they're like, oh, sweet death, and it's like, and they worship it so much, but then they start dying, and I'm like, yeah, that's what death is, like, you dumbass, and he just gets, like, freaking sucked into the atmosphere by Dormammu, which, that interaction between Stephen Strange and Dormammu is still, like, one of my favorite scenes. It's so hilarious. But
what does he say, bargain, or what does he say again?
Dormammu, I've come to bargain. But I think that, what Doctor Strange 1 really was just setting up for the other villain. Remember his friend who then at the end is like, yeah, my whole world is shattered. I'm going to go be a bad guy now.
Right. Which I thought that was so dramatic, by the way. Like, so dramatic.
So dramatic, and I don't even know, like, how they're going to continue on with that in the second one, because based on, like, the shit that I've heard about the second one, it doesn't even seem like that guy would even fit in properly with it, but who knows. But, Brittany, I agree. I don't even really know how to say his name, Kalish, whatever. But I also think that he is a really bad villain in the sense that you really just you didn't care about him, which is crazy because, again, it's freaking Mads Mikkelsen, and he's a fantastic actor, so you would think that he would have been better, Yeah,
I agree.
You agree, okay. So I am going to take number 10, and I'm going to go with a actual TV show. And I don't know, Brittany, if you finished the first season of Luke Cage, but it is going to be Diamondback from the first season of Luke Cage.
Okay, Diamondback, not Cottonmouth, right?
Not Cottonmouth. Okay, so that goes into why I dislike Diamondback. So you have the first season of Luke Cage, which in my opinion wasn't as good as the second season. I really loved the second season of Luke Cage, but in the first season, you obviously have the first half is Cottonmouth, played by Mahershala Ali. And he was fantastic. He was a great villain, very much like, Loki, misunderstood, went down a bad path, really great. That was captivating to me. That was the thing that probably kept me in Luke Cage season 1 because of how good Cottonmouth was. And then halfway through the frickin' season, they kill him off. I didn't expect that because the trailers make it seem like he's the main villain. And so he's gone, and then you have a Diamondback coming in, and he was essentially an arms dealer who was kind of, in the shadows for the first half. Like, you heard about him. I believe that's where Cottonmouth was getting his supplies of guns, and you knew that he was probably very villainy because Shades kept saying to Cottonmouth, Diamondback's not going to like that. If you can't get your shit together here, he's going to have to come in and blah, blah, blah. So he comes in, and you find out, and I feel like it's thrown in so, shittily, that he is either a stepbrother or half-brother of Luke Cage. It was just bad, it was so boring to me. The character was not entertaining at all. It was awkward, and sometimes I felt like his villain was so awkward that, the people around him kind of got awkward then because they didn't know it. It was just not done properly. I didn't care at all about Diamondback. I didn't see him as a, really truly dangerous villain or anything like that. And if you go back and look at their final battle between Diamondback and Luke Cage, Diamondback has this suit that is made by Hammer Technologies, and we all know that Hammer Tech is not good. So he has this suit that is supposed to help him go hand to hand with someone like Luke Cage, who is, a freaking superhuman. And the freaking suit looks like, I don't know how to describe it, but the people who go to defuse bombs and they're given that big, plushy suit to, prevent, hopefully that they don't get blown up. I know that I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm just, what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what his suit looked like. It was terrible.
Oh, I'm looking it up right now. Oh, that's bad. He looks like RoboCop.
A little, right? A little bit like RoboCop. Yeah, so I know that I probably didn't do the best job of explaining Diamondback, but that's really just because I had no interest in this character at all. And I think I also was just super pissed that they killed Cottonmouth halfway throughout the season when that made zero freaking sense, and then brought in Diamondback. He was just so bad. I hated Diamondback. Oh, I hated Diamondback. I just, that's why I can't really watch the second half of Luke Cage. I'll only watch up until Cottonmouth gets killed.
It's kind of like what I'm starting to realize is a bad villain isn't particularly the bad acting or this. It's their forgettable storylines because villains are supposed to be the almost the punchline, right? They are they're the punch. They're the climax of the story. Whether or not even say someone like Hannibal, it was they're either sneaking under the surface, and the badness is coming, or that they're about to do something really messed up, like kill off one of the family members of the main character, or the love of their life, or they kidnap someone. But what's bad is when they have a really forgettable villain, because I feel like at that point, are they truly a villain? Or are they just like, you know what I mean? Like, they were basically a waste of, like, a storyline at that point.
Yeah, and that's what I think is that it was a complete waste. I don't really know who the actor is, so I'm not going to sit here and say anything negative about that. But you have someone like Mahershala Ali, who's just such a powerhouse actor, and you kill him off with. So to me, it's like not only was that a bad story plot, but then you don't leave it open to being able to bring him back. You know. So that's why, like, season 1, I know season 1 broke Netflix, but to me, season 1, that's why I feel like it was just subpar because of the decisions that they made throughout the way, and that's why season 2 will always feel superior to me. But yeah, so Diamondback, Luke Cage, season 1, just a bad villain. No like.
Tell me how you really feel.
That's how I really feel. But Brittany, what is your number 8?
Let me think really quick. Oh, by the way, I was laughing. You said, let me take the number 10 slot. And I was like, but I just did number 10. What?
Did I?
Yes, it's okay. It just made me laugh.
I'm at number 9. You know what? Again, this like new recording platform is throwing me off. We didn't get to do our, freaking intro music or anything. Which, when I say that, obviously it's going to be edited or that goes in. So people listening are going to be like, "What are you talking about? I just heard the top 10 intro." It's like, but we didn't hear the top 10 intro, and we normally do.
Right. Well, like. I don't know. Like I actually like this because you actually sound more clear and you sound like I'm talking right next to you.
You sound like you sound normally when we talk on the phone or when we're in person with each other. Like to me, I'm like, oh, that's right. That's what Brittany sounds like. And I like that. To me, there's no lag, right? Because I'll find when we're talking, there's a lag there.
Yeah. That's what I realized. That's why, like, normally if you're going to say something, right, and I want to hop in and like touch on that or make a joke or something, it will like lag, and then it's already into what something else you're saying, and then you're like, what the hell is she talking about? What is like?
I know.
But on this, like, now I can catch you as you're saying something. And I'm excited, too, because even, it's like I have that mic and stuff, and I have my stream set up. I can actually connect to Skype through that, and you could probably even hear me 10 times better then. So it's more exciting to be doing it this way.
I'm glad. Hopefully, our excitement will all be for good, and it actually has recorded, and it's in a little file, and I can freaking send it to Kevin. Not Kevin. Wow. Kanan. I don't know why I said Kevin. I'm like losing it here, but Kanan, and I'll be able to give it to him, and he'll do his magic. But anyway, Brittany, number 8.
Let me look. Let's see here. I always do that where I'm like, let's see, I'm going to go with, the OG Venom. From, which Spider-Man was it? Was it Spider-Man 2 or 3?
It was Spider-Man 3 with, oh god, what was his name? The actor. He was from that 70s show.
I gotta see now. But, like, okay.
You keep going. I'll look it up.
What was his name again? What is his name?
With the actual character or the actor?
That's how forgettable it is.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Now you're going in and out a little.
You hear me now?
Yeah. Are you talking about the character you want to know?
Yes, the character, because I knew him as...
Eddie Brock.
Eddie Brock. Okay, in that movie... So, Eddie Brock is always more in the comics portrayed as, like a Tom Hardy type, right? He's
right.
Like, not a true villain. He's an anti-hero more than actual villain.
I'm sorry. the actor who played the Venom you're talking about is Topher Grace. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Topher Grace, was that the name of the actor?
The actor.
Okay. Well, so in normal Venom, which I haven't seen the newer Venom, he's either a bigger guy or he has, that kind of yin and yang with Venom and, what he's up to. But in that movie, he was just a dick. Like, he was such a whiny little, nothing. And as, you're going through with his character, at first, I didn't even know he was Venom, by the way, as a kid. I did not know what he was. Because I knew that, he had that black goo on him, and I knew, oh, look, he's like a different Spider-Man. But I thought he was just basically like the anti-Spider-Man at that point. I'm just trying to, put my finger on what I didn't particularly like about him. And I think also, too, that movie was so bad in its own right that anything that's, connected to that storyline, I was like, I don't know about that. But it did give birth to Peter Parker doing that really goofy, intro, where he's, kind of dancing and walking and pointing at these ladies and thinking he's so hot, and he's
you mean
going
emo
through...
Spider-Man?
Emo Spider-Man, emo man. But with him, I don't know. I guess it was just because he was so whiny, and I get the whole point was his villain. Oh, why are you a villain? Well, he made me lose my job. And you're like, okay, I would be salty too, but you want to murder people and let this monster inside of you so you can be like Spider-Man and this or that. And I'm like, I don't know. I guess it's not worse. It wasn't a great movie, like I said, in its own right. Maybe if it had been, say, in Spider-Man 1 or 2, it would have been a little bit better. But I think especially with, but we also have to think of what CGI probably was back. Cause when was Spider-Man 3 even made? Because we think back and think of how CGI and special effects have, upgraded throughout it. But I will never, he has, that spiky blonde hair that's so reminiscent of, the early 2000s, Back Boys type shit. And I was like, Well, what do you think about him? Am I being too harsh on him?
No, absolutely not. First, let me start by saying that Venom that came out in 2018 is available on Hulu, and I do suggest watching it. It was actually really good. I'm sorry, I can't, I know that, first of all, it made a shit ton of money, but a lot of people are like, oh, it was iffy, blah, blah. I remember liking it in the movie theater, and then I rewatched it about a month ago, and I'm like, I still like it. I really can't sit here and say that I didn't like it, I thought it was good. I thought it was a good origins, and Tom Hardy was a good Eddie Brock,
How
Venom... First of all, he's big and bulky, it makes him look, and that's another thing, Venom from Spider-Man 3 was essentially, as you said, the anti Spider-Man. It freaking was just the Spider-Man suit with the black, right? But Venom in the Venom movie is this big gooey, big brolic ass monster, like Thanos size almost, maybe not so much, but
That said, he's a nasty ass.
Well, and then he's also just such an ass. He'll say things, and he'd be like, I don't even know how to say it or anything. But oh god, what was I gonna say? He calls Eddie Brock a loser. He's like, you're a loser, like me, and he'll say things like that, because it's. The symbiote Venom is its own entity, and then Eddie Brock is its own entity, so they talk to each other, right? So I like that aspect, especially when the two get on the same page, because at first they're not on the same page. But going back to the the Venom in Spider-Man 3, first of all, I knew that Spider-Man 3 was shit when I was in the movie theater and frickin' Peter Parker looked in the mirror and literally put his hair in front of his face like an emo kid. And I was like, oh, God. So bad.
I think that too, when that movie came out, weren't you probably still in your goth phase? Not a phase, Mom. But
No. Goth and punk is different than emo. Let's get that
no, I'm
straight.
saying that you would already hated it. That you would already hated it for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. That was 100%. I was like, I can't believe they just put this in Spider-Man 3. I think Juwan had told me, though, at some point that, like, Sam Raimi, who did the original Spider-Man trilogy, had a lot of conflict with the studio at this point, and he kind of just made this movie as, like, an FU to the studio. I don't know how true that is, but I can see it. But... yeah, I mean, Topher Grace's Venom, it wasn't really a Venom. It was essentially you just got the Spider-Man suit and made it black. He wasn't intimidating to me. Venom needs to be this big, imposing force. That's what you see in the comics. That's what you saw in 2018's Venom. He's big and he's intimidating. And, they made it just so much worse. And I think if I remember correctly, in the third one, it wasn't really like an alien entity. It was just a goo that then made him like more evil. But in like the 2018, it was that was an alien entity. So there was that like, dualness to it. You had Eddie Brock's personality, but then you also had Venom's personality. And and especially now after seeing the 2018 Venom and I'm comparing it, that I just don't think that the Venom from Spider-Man 3 was successful at all. That whole movie, though, was shit. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, I agree with, with the newer Venom, it is like two sides of a coin, right? Like, it's two different entities. But I think they explained in Spider-Man 3, it was just basically like, oh, it makes you have negative thoughts, and oh, it influences your personality. But even in the comics and stuff, Venom is very much like his own being. Like, he's basically a parasite, and they attach on. They're not just like, like, I guess I'm just trying to find a way to explain it. Basically like an extraterrestrial at that point, and it's kind of, I don't know, Spider-Man 3 was just so boring and bad.
It was so bad, but that's what I don't want to give too much away because you really should watch Venom 2018. I really liked it, but that's essentially what it is. They're beings from another planet, and they get on Earth. So he's already an alien, and the whole thing that they explain is that they can't live on Earth without attaching to someone because our atmosphere is different, obviously, than their atmosphere. So that explains why they need to attach themselves to someone. And that's why he ends up attaching himself to Eddie Brock, and it ends up being like, and that's another thing that they explain, is that not all, like, attachments are going to work. Like, they show how it either ends up killing the symbiote, because there's plenty of other symbiotes in it, or it ends up killing the person. So Eddie and Venom just happen to be a good match, and Eddie is just like, what the fuck is going on? What the hell?
Those kind of relationships.
And the greatest thing, by the way, because I'm looking at GIFs, because I'm trying to find one to, like, send you, but it's, like, a lot of fan art on Tumblr, which I'm not knocking you guys, but freaking Venom hates being called a parasite. So anytime someone's like, Eddie, you have a parasite, he's like, what? He was like, I'm gonna fuck people up. And at the end, Eddie, like, tells his bodega, like, person, he's like, oh, I have a parasite. And as they're leaving, Venom's like, parasite, and Eddie's just like, chill out, man. Chill out.
I was so funny when I called him a parasite because he had to get a host, and it's like he would have hated that.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. It was entertaining. If you don't have a Hulu account, I'll lend it to you. I'll help you out.
legal way. You're going to show me how to set up my own billing information and purchase it with my own money, correct?
No, I'll give you my login.
I was trying to be facetious.
Oh, you bitch. No, not being very nice. I'm trying to help you out here.
No, I'm just joking. Because, like when they're like, this totally legal download that will totally give you this program for free.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why I was like, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You're going to totally help me out there.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Hashtag not sorry. Right? Right?
That, and absolutely.
Absolutely. Juwan is here in spirit, obviously.
All right.
But all right, I'm sorry about that. Let's move on. I do love that pick. I am going to do. All right, so let's get this over with. This one here. It is going to be Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor in Batman versus Superman. Oh, God, did I hate this version of Lex Luthor. Let me tell you that the other day when my Wi-Fi wasn't working, like about a week or so ago, I was on regular cable TV. I know, ooh, cable TV.
Oh, man.
And Batman versus Superman was playing. And I was like, I've only seen that movie once. Let me rewatch it and see if I can somehow see what other people are saying, how they enjoy this movie. Nope, still bad. And Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor is so cringy to me. I mean, listen, you don't have to get Corey Stoll as Lex Luthor. I'm just suggesting it to you, Hollywood. But besides that, any of us...
So good. He'd be so good.
He'd be so good. But it's like us who have grown up on like animated series and even other portrayals of Lex Luthor. He is a powerful businessman who is smart and cunning, a little reserved. Jesse Eisenberg played his Lex Luthor as if he was playing his Lex Luthor the same way that Ezra Miller, I don't know how to say his name, plays his Barry Allen. Just this very sporadic
point. That's such a
right,
good point.
Right?
That's such a good point.
Very sporadic, very all over the place. And I don't know how much of that is Jesse Eisenberg and how much of that is Zack Snyder, because it's like, did he literally direct the two to act the same exact way? But I just, and I think that some people like to point out, oh, well, just like how Jared Leto's Joker is a different version of Joker, right? And they're saying, oh, well, this is how Lex Luthor would be in this like information technology era. And I'm like, first of all, no. There's Joker, even though his attire may have been different, he was the Joker. That's how the Joker is. Freaking Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor was not Lex Luthor. He was all over the place. And it's not just him, it's because he wasn't bald. Fine. If you're saying that it's an origin story before he got bald, that's fine. All right. It's still weird that he had hair.
The bald head is him.
That's his look.
You know what he was?
What?
He was like when your parents say a Halloween costume's too expensive and they say, oh, it's okay, I'll make you one. Or when people are like, or those memes where it's like, Mom, I want Lex Luthor. We have Lex Luthor at home, opens up the cabinet and can see him.
It was so bad. When he started talking, I was like, this is not Lex Luthor. I'm like, this is not Lex Luthor, how he would act at all. And then his motives are really weird. Like, if you go back and watch Batman versus Superman, there's very much a correlation between that movie and, say, religion, because he's always talking about the gods. And I think that was like his plight maybe against Superman, was that he, was so powerful and people were like worshiping him and stuff. But even his motivation wasn't good. in your head, you're like, why do I care? And his acting, and he would go all over the place, and I just, oh God, I'm not going to sit here and say I can't put my finger on, because I know exactly what bothered me about Lex Luthor in that movie, but it's just so, how many times can I say, like, that's just not Lex Luthor at all. To me, when I imagine Lex Luthor, it's, either from the animated series or even, like, okay, I never really watched Smallville, right? No. But I know that everyone loved Michael Rosenbaum's portrayal of Lex Luthor. And granted, Smallville is like them in high school, so that really is, say, before they all become who we know them as. But even in that, from what I've heard, is, a more accurate portrayal of Lex Luthor, like his personality and the rise and how he would get to the point of being who we know today. It was like an understandable and a plausible rise, whereas Jesse Eisenberg's, like, I can't, because Juwan will say, like, well, you have to imagine, like, that's, him before the real Lex Luthor that we know, because at the end of Justice League, you see him, bald, and he's in a suit, and blah, 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 and I'm like, but I can't imagine his personality changing so drastically from one movie to the next, Like, he would still keep some of that.
And my thing is, like, I know it's like a weird nitpick too, is his body type. Like, yeah. For me, Lex Luthor was always a big and foreboding person, and my thing too is, like you said, I always think of the show. I always think of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. That was my childhood. That was your childhood. He was always a big foreboding dude. Like, he was big, but not like, he was broad-shouldered. He was intimidating. And he had a great backstory, and you can go, oh, well, for me, to have some, like, Weasley-looking mofo to play him, I was like, okay, we could have any, super smart, sort of dweeby, weak-looking dude. You know what I mean? Like, I know that sounds, but it goes into that stereotype. Oh, the smart guy, right? The smart guy who's kind of, lithe and kind of weaker looking. And I just don't think him, like, I feel bad because I know he gets typecasted, the actor, but, like, he just was not a good fit for that kind of role. Like, that shouldn't have been him trying to get out of those funnier, boy gets the girl type movies. And I guess that whole movie was bad in itself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, most of these movies are awful. But, there was another point to it that I was going to make. But basically, yeah, Corey Stoll would be 10 times better. Oh, and you know who I actually kind of see for it, too? But I think he's getting kind of too old for it. I can't remember his name, but from Sneaky Pete, my favorite villain, Malcolm in the Middle.
Yes. Oh my God, Bryan Cranston. He would be good.
Yes, because especially when you think back to Breaking Bad with, like, The Rock and the bald head, he can work it.
No, absolutely. I think if they wanted to do, say, maybe even an older version of Lex Luthor, he would be perfect in it. I have no, like, I'm just fan casting here. Corey Stoll, I think, would be a good Lex Luthor. But if they came out, like, tomorrow and said that in a new movie, Bryan Cranston is going to be Lex, I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Especially, like, I don't know, this would be biting off Breaking Bad a lot, but, in Justice League, when he has kryptonite poisoning from having worked with it, like, he basically has cancer from it.
Right.
From the kryptonite and working so closely with it all those years, you could even have that version of him.
Yeah, exactly. No, it would be really great. Like that. See, that's the thing. Is I think they try to go too outside the box, but that is something that I was saying. This is going to be super controversial, but I really don't care. I don't think Zack Snyder gets these comic book characters the way that some people think that he gets them. If he if he truly understood these characters, he would not have made his Lex Luthor like that. He would not have made his Barry Allen like that. So I definitely, Lex Luthor from Batman versus Superman definitely gets the vote for me. So yeah. And I don't care who hears it.
That was a good pick. Yeah, that was a good one.
Thank you. So Brittany, it is your turn. What is your number 6?
I think I'm gonna go with Whiplash from Iron Man 2, I believe.
Okay, I'm so glad that you explained that, because like, I guess behind the curtains info here, when you sent me your list, I was like, who is Whiplash? I forgot, and it's like I didn't even know that that's what that character was named. So yes, absolutely.
I'm going with Whiplash because he felt so shoehorned into it. Like, okay, I like the thought of Hammer, right? A technological genius who, I don't even know if he was a genius. Sorry, let me rewrap. He was an arms dealer, right?
Right.
And, him being jealous of Tony and, having that rivalry where I wouldn't even consider him like a villain. He was full of jealousy. It's a different world with that kind of like he was like the anti-Tony. While Tony was trying to get away from the arms dealing, he was wanting to jump in, and he had his technology company, and him trying to rise up. I like that. You get to see him have some sort of. Didn't he almost feel bad for it because he never meant for Whiplash to be that bad? He didn't want him to kill Tony. He just wanted to like show him up or something. There was like something with that. But you bring in Whiplash, who is a genius, who is Joe. Like, it just felt like you had the same person twice in a movie, like the brain and the brawn. And it wasn't it that Whiplash, Mickey Rourke's character, was basically like, yeah, he's a genius too, and he just wanted to show that his technology was like. Hammer wanted to show that the technology was better than Tony's, but he had this big thing against him because I don't know. I don't even know his story. I don't even remember his plot.
So the thing is that Whiplash's father was previously a worker for Tony Stark's family, or either it was something that so he freaking worked for Tony Stark's father, and the technology that the father came up with was used, I think, by Howard Stark, and then the father was fired pretty much. So it was kind of like, you're using tech of ours, but then you kind of throw us off to the side. Something around that. So he always felt scorned that, while they're living in poverty in, say, Russia, the Starks have this big lavish life because they're so, rich. And I do agree, I go back and watch Iron Man 2, and I didn't mind it, right? I had fun. Justin Hammer, and especially because I like Sam Rockwell, I really loved his performance. He was just having so much fun there. But I like the idea of, because, Tony Stark leaves the arms business, and you would have to imagine there's other arms dealers out there. So, if anything, doesn't Justin Hammer kind of say, he was like, I love that. He's like, why would I be angry at you? He was like, you got out of the business. That means, I'm the business. But I think it was that Tony just kept insulting him by saying that his tech was shit. And I think that was his thing. He really wanted to show up Tony, but he didn't plan on all of the destruction. He just brought in that guy in. He just brought Whiplash in because he wanted his help in making a better suit to kind of be his answer to Iron Man. Because we see at the beginning of Iron Man, what'd you say?
They wanted to show him up too, right? They wanted to show, oh look, my technology's better because I beat you in a fair fight.
Well, yeah, well, and they want, because they had like the expo where they show your technology, and since Tony wasn't doing weapons anymore, it's like, oh, this is Justin Hammer's, time to shine. And they even show at some point in the beginning of the second Iron Man that all these different countries are trying to replicate the Iron Man suit, and so is Justin Hammer. So he brought in Whiplash for that purpose, but Whiplash was using that as his own means of getting revenge, because it wasn't Justin Hammer who, had all of those suits programmed to start shooting people and blow up. That was Whiplash. But sorry, I know that I was going on a tangent there about Justin Hammer. I just really like Justin Hammer. He was just an idiot, all right? He just wanted Tony's love. He was always like, Anthony! And Tony's like, oh, God, someone get me out of here.
Right? Well, that's what gets me. It's like, Mickey Rourke's character was so forgettable, and I think that goes back. It's like, it's not even what they do. It's just that they're forgettable. Like,
Well, yeah.
His backstory is good. Like, that's a good backstory, right? That's
Yeah.
good, like, hey, scorn, the family, because you know what they say, like, sins of the father, all that stuff. But he felt so shoehorned in, and with, like, and Mickey Rourke had been through a lot. I don't know if he was quite ready for a comeback, like, trying to do that movie. And maybe that was part of it, too. I don't know if it was just the actor or the writing. But, but then again, Iron Man has faced a problem of bad villains. Like, that's a big thing for them. Like, Loki was a great villain, but Tony, really even all the other movies didn't have great villains, except I will say Thor is the master of good villains, though, because of what was it, what's his name, the Grandmaster.
The Grandmaster and Hela.
Yes. Oh, quick side note. This is a random note. I didn't realize how strange, what's his name? Is it Jeff Goldblum? Is that his name?
Jeff Goldblum, yeah.
Yeah. I watched The Race for the Double Helix, which was basically like a documentary type movie on the race for finding out if it's the double helix for our DNA, what the actual structure looks like. And Jeff Goldblum is in that, and he is so weird, like, not creepy, but like, he's so, like, I forgot what kind of actor Jeff Goldblum is. Like, he is
he's off the wall.
He's off the wall. He's super off the wall. This was one of, like, his first movies, and I was just, I don't know. That's my side vote. But yeah, screw Whiplash. He wasn't a great villain.
Well, so the thing is that someone points out, because if you remember, Iron Man 2 was still during the first phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the first phase of the MCU definitely had these villains in their movie that were supposed to be another version, essentially, of the main character. So you have Tony Stark, who is intelligent, and he gets his own hands dirty. He knows how to put together a suit that has the arc reactor in the center. Whiplash pretty much is a genius who knows how to put together a suit, and he has his own version of, like, an exoskeleton with his own version of, like, say, an arc reactor in the middle. And that's the thing, is that it was just too, like, Iron Man 1 and 2 had villains that were just too much alike to Tony, because the first one also had a guy who was in a suit. And that was kind of like what the first phase did. Like, I love Corey Stoll's Yellow Jacket, but he definitely was supposed to be another version of Ant-Man, right? So that's just kind of what it was. But yeah, like, Whiplash is so unforgettable. His whole thing, like, Iron Man, I like Iron Man 2, but I like it because Justin Hammer, I love that it's Don Cheadle's introduction to the MCU. I liked that it's Tony dealing with the frickin' arc reactor essentially killing him, and all of that. So I like that there was good aspects of Iron Man 2, but Whiplash wasn't one of them.
You know what you reminded me of for a second? When you're like, oh, you have a guy that's trying to be another guy, and I was thinking about how, you basically, essentially, with Hammer and the other guy, you have two people trying to be the other person. Not exactly him trying to be, but, like, the technology. And it made me think, and it was ironic, because Robert Downey Jr. plays this character, too. Have you ever seen Tropic Thunder?
I knew that I've never seen it, but I knew that that's what you were talking about. And it's like, I'm just a guy playing another guy playing another guy.
Some dude playing another dude that's playing another dude.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought of. It's instantly what I thought of.
Well, that's exactly what it was. So, but I think this is a great pick because Whiplash definitely was a incredibly unforgettable villain. Speaking about unforgettable villains, so the funny thing is I was kind of laughing to myself when you were like, Thor's had a great track record for his villains. And it's like, yes and no. Because obviously Loki was amazing, and Hela and Grandmaster were good villains then in Thor 3. But Thor 2, The Dark World, had probably one of the worst villains in the MCU, and I think his name was like Malekith or something. I'm just gonna say the elf dude. All right, that's what I literally have in my notes. The elf dude. And if it gives you any sort of indication of how bad that this is that the actor, who I don't remember his name, I'm not going to look it up just yet, but he played the Doctor on one of the seasons of Doctor Who, but he disliked that character a lot. Like if you go and look at interviews, he says that he did not enjoy playing that character. He did not enjoy that character at all, being in that movie. And it's like, okay, if he couldn't stand it, then we definitely couldn't stand it.
Yeah, we don't stand it.
But you know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, so you have like these weird dark elves, and they're supposed to be like these villains that again are going to bring on the end times because they like worship the ether and blah blah blah. And I don't even like really remember their storyline or what their motivation were, but they definitely disliked Odin because I believe they had some sort of fight with Odin at some point in the past. But it was just really like a poor reasoning. They were boring as hell. There was nothing exciting about them. I hated their characters. And I don't know if you watched Thor: The Dark World, right?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Oh, sorry, Toby decided he wanted to play, right? And he sunk his claw so deep into my hand, I couldn't unhook his claw from my hand. So I was like, ooh, give me a second. Give me a second. Toby, you learned some claw control, broski. But, no, I was going to say, isn't that where Thor's mom died, too? Like, that was so randomly thrown in. Like,
yes,
that movie...
Thor's mom dies in the second, Thor movie, and it's because of, I think he's killed by Malekith.
Oh, like, yeah, I think so. And, like, that whole movie is forgettable in that, but I don't even remember this villain hardly. I think I only saw that movie, like, once, and it's funny. I felt like that was just a lot of money spent to just give a scene an end game of them going back in the past.
The only good thing about Thor: The Dark World was freaking Loki. That was it. I literally, if I go back and try, like, to me, Thor: The Dark World is so unwatchable. I can only go and skip around to the Loki scenes. They're the only decent ones to me in that whole entire film. As you said, the villain is incredibly unforgettable. The plot, to me, that movie made me really, really dislike Jane, which is why I'm a little, like, hesitant to frickin' whatchamacalls. It makes me a little hesitant for Thor Love and Thunder, you know, the fourth Thor that's coming out, because Taika Waititi announced at San Diego Comic-Con that Jane is coming back. But
No.
hopefully with Taika it'll be better, because to be fair, I didn't think that Thor was an interesting character at all in the entire, like, first half of the MCU. But then when Thor Ragnarok came and Taika, like, you know, was really able to help direct him in a better light and all that, then suddenly, you know, Thor becomes one of my favorite characters. So I'm hoping that Taika just does the same thing to Natalie Portman. And Natalie Portman had walked away from the MCU. She wasn't, like, fired or anything. She said, like, she didn't want to be in it anymore. So you have to know that, like, the script is really good, that she feels like she wants to come back. So hopefully this is something that she'll be excited for and put her best foot forward.
Either the script was good or the money was good.
Well, I mean, I don't think that Natalie Portman is pining for money. She is one of, like, Hollywood's top tier, like, actresses. So, but you're right. No. You could be completely right there. I mean, it's Marvel money. I'll be an extra in a Marvel film. Just give me something of that, you know?
Kill me off in a movie, please, and I will be there. I will be there.
I will show up. But yeah, just Malekith was so bad. I think that definitely he is one of the worst villains. Like, I think that this is one of the worst movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Okay.
I have to say one fun fact, Brittany, before I push it over to you. You ready for it?
Oh, no.
So remember in Thor: The Dark World how Loki dies at some point?
Yes, like he dies where he has that very emotional speech and Thor cries.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's reenacted in Thor Ragnarok, but that apparently was supposed to be Loki's actual end. They had planned to kill off Loki. That's why it was so emotional and it was so grandiose, is because that was supposed to be the last time we see Loki. But with these movies, they always do like a test audience before they push it out to the theaters. And they did a test audience, and that was so ill-received that's why they threw in that scene at the end with Loki sitting on the throne posing as Odin.
But you know, what's good about that is they took it back, right? And they were like, okay, maybe that wasn't a good idea, right?
Yeah.
But it also led to such a good character moment for Loki, because you could go, oh, he had his good point, right? He died a hero. But then you see him basically like sitting like a smug mofo on the throne. Like I know that wasn't originally the plan, but it worked out so well for his character, for the kind of like mischievous bastard he can be.
It worked out so well because that's who Loki is. Like, to me, I was like, oh, what did he do to Odin? Like, to me, I saw that and I was just like, this is Loki. He is a trickster. He always has something up his sleeve. And of course, and someone even pointed out, like, good old Tumblr definitely points shit out. But they said that if you look back on any times that you see Odin sitting, he's very, he sits up straight. His legs are kind of like, like straight and narrow, like knees up and all that. He's a leader. He's the king. But Loki always sits, lazily. His legs are all sprawled out. He's leaning to one side. And that's exactly how Odin was sitting in that end credit scene when then it's finally revealed that it's Loki. So it's like you could see right then and there, if you go back, that clearly wasn't Odin.
Yeah, I love it. see, it's like it was such a bad movie, but at least like good things can come from it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, you can see the good in any movie, really, if you look, except Batman versus Superman or Justice League. But, but yeah.
Shots fired, girl. Shots fired.
You left me hanging for a second. You weren't laughing with me, and I was like, oh, I just made a cheesy joke, didn't I?
No. For some reason, like, it, like, cut in, like, at a weird point, and I was like, it took me a second to register what you said, and then I was like, oh, snap, girl. They're gonna burn down your apartment. The Dexter fans, I mean. Oh, there was a point I was gonna make. Oh, it was about Thor. Oh, it was a good point. I can't remember it now, Tia.
You poor bitch.
I know.
Sorry, I had to stretch. I was like, sorry. If you remember it, come back to it, but it's also your turn.
So, you know, like when you're trying to remember, but it's your turn to speak, and you're like, oh no, I'm distracted now. I'm distracted by my own thoughts. I'm gonna go with Mandarin, but not the Mandarin. We're gonna go with Trevor Slattery. Was that his name?
Yes, from the third Iron Man. Yes, go ahead.
I'm gonna go, not just because, like, okay, you know, like, oh, he's the worst villain. No, I'm doing it because he's the worst villain. Like, he's the worst at being a villain. Because you have this whole setup, right? Of, like, oh, the Mandarin, you know, oh, you know, the famous terrorist. And I was reading about him. The reason they really used his face a lot is they wanted him influenced by the culture, but they didn't want to do a racist stereotype. Because if you look back to what the Mandarin looks like, he is very not good for stereotypes. And so they were like, oh, well, we'll have this guy in, right? Which, they, you know, and have him be influenced by the culture, have him influenced with, like, say, the hair and the style and, like, the decor of his place. But then you go through and you're like, okay, Mandarin, the famous terrorist, you know, oh, you know, he's a villain. And then you see him, and he's just a freaking idiot, Tia. Like, he is so goofy that he's an actor hired to play this part just to stir things up. He's sleeping with all the ladies in that little, that what would you call it? A palace? Was it a palace? But, like, the whole thing, and he's like a super British accent, like talking about how he's getting paid, and oh yeah, just do a few parts, and he's just silly. But also birthed, like, I will say, as awful of a villain as he is, it birthed the one shot with Scoot McNairy.
Yeah.
Buddy. What was his name? What is it again?
Jackson Norris.
Oh, yes, Jackson Norris, who is amazing in his own right. Like, I really hope that they keep him in. But, yeah, it was like, it was such, like, it threw me off. It definitely was one of those twists, though, that I was like, okay, I'm ready. Like, is he going to fight? Does he have mystical powers? Is he just rich? And then he comes in with that stupid freaking face, like, oh yeah, you know, they just, they paid me to do this, you know, but how can I say no? Look at the ladies, look at the things I have, and you're like, what? What? Like, dude, you know, they're, like, doing terrorist shit and, like, having you record these videos, but because you're getting laid, you're fine with it? But what? So, yeah, Trevor Slattery. Pretty interesting dude. Bad villain, though.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, I just wanted to look up something really quick before I spoke and, like, totally, like, you know, made an ass out of myself. But, freaking, yeah, so I want to say really quick that the one shot called All Hail the King kind of made me appreciate what they were doing a little bit more in Iron Man 3. The fact that it was just a like face and that wasn't the real Mandarin, that pretty much in Iron Man 3, the real villain, who was played by Guy Pearce, which I can't remember his villain's name, but that he was using the Mandarin as a way to stir up terror, so that he could essentially draw out Iron Man. But the thing is that, you know, it's like that would have been cool, right? To have that as like, okay, this guy never was the villain. He was just using it and kind of ignorantly using the Mandarin without any sort of previous knowledge, which then would anger the real Mandarin. But it's been years and they haven't followed up on that. And it's like finally in about 2 years when we get the Shang-Chi movie, we'll see the real Mandarin, but who knows if they're even going to touch upon that. So to me, it was like kind of a useless plot point because it never was followed up upon. And if you've never seen the one-shot All Hail the King, then you kind of have a right to be angry there because, you know, the Mandarin, which I understand what you mean, Brittany, kind of, you know, the stereotypes, because there is a villain that I think they said they won't use because he's, you know, this like typical Asian villain that's been like shown in a shit ton of things, like the typical, you know, I can't remember what they call it, like Feng Shi something or something like that, you know, like this typical villain that's so a stereotype. So they said they'll never like use. Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I think when I looked it up, they call it the Fu Manchu.
Yes. They said, and that's a character. Like, that's a look that they've used throughout the years, but that's also a character, and they're like, we'll never use that character, because if you look back on any, like, live adaptation of that character, it's always played by a white dude. So it's always, like, the stereotype, you know? And the thing is like, I can see, though, where the anger comes from with the Mandarin, because it's like, you have a character who's supposed to be like a huge villain in the comic books, and he's reduced to this like silly actor who's played essentially by a white dude. Granted, Ben Kingsley is, I believe, also half Indian, but, you know, not a Chinese person, you know, not played by someone who it's meant to, you know, be played by. But
yeah.
If you watch, you know, the one-shot All Hail the King, it makes more sense, and it's kind of then you appreciate that plot point a little better, but again, it wasn't followed up on. That one-shot came out in 2014. It still hasn't been followed up on, so that's frustrating. And yeah, I mean, it was just a terrible villain because it wasn't a villain, and it could have been a cool villain, because if you go back and rewatch Iron Man 3, it's like they had cool shit going on, because they had like, you know, this like terrorist who's causing all these deaths and stuff, and it was kind of really dark for a Marvel movie, and then it just became silly, and it's like, oh, you had to go in that direction.
That was the thing. It was silly, because I remember watching it, I was like, oh my god, this is intense. You know,
yeah,
because, you know, all the other movies had almost been kind of, I wouldn't say child-friendly, because you do have, like, with the terrorists in the first one.
Yeah.
And dealing with all of that. But, you know, they were more, like, consumable for, you know, the average viewer, right? And so then when you get into this about the death and destruction, and then it's just silly. It felt like a kid's movie at that point. And I was going to say also, one last thing on the stereotyping. Did you ever watch Boomerang?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, it was right under Cartoon Network, and all those old shows, they have new stereotype everywhere. Everywhere. Like, I was like, and as a kid, you don't think much about it, but definitely as an adult, you can see definitely why they would have wanted to avoid that for, you know, now.
Oh, they have all those bad stereotypes in those old cartoons. I mean, Speedy Gonzales, the mouse, you know, all of that. And there's a thing that they haven't, because they never edited the Looney Tunes. They just have a disclaimer in front of it saying, you know, it was a different time and we recognize that all that is, you know, unacceptable now, and just keep that in mind as you're watching it. But yeah, no, absolutely. So that it's like, I guess they were trying in Iron Man 3 to get away from the stereotype, but then you just kind of, you were tone deaf in getting someone who's not Chinese to play this character. And also Iron Man 3 was directed by a different person than the first two. Iron Man 1 and 2 were directed by Jon Favreau. Iron Man 3, I loved Jon Favreau, but he couldn't come back for the third one. I believe he was, you know, busy. I think he was doing that movie Chef or something, so he just had enough time to come and act in it. But so Sean Black, who's done, I believe, the Predator movies or something like that, he came and did it. So I think that's why it had a bit of a darker tone to it, but it's still, it just, yeah, no. They could have went in a much better direction than they did. So Trevor Slattery as the Mandarin, terrible villain.
Terrible. And I was going to say two last points for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
One, I was going to say, well, one for that, when you try, like, I know what they were trying to do with Trevor, but the Mandarin is such a good villain. And I think with, what's the movie coming up now, is that with a lot of the Marvel movies, you do kind of get away where they don't have much of a Asian representation. So at least they'll especially get that with the new, what's it called? It's called
Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Yes, like, I think that's going to be amazing because you end up taking that away. And I was also going to say, other side note, because it got brought up, so Speedy Gonzalez, right? They took him away at first because of the stereotype and stuff. But the Hispanic population was so outraged because they loved him so much that they kept him back. They were so upset, and they brought him back. They said, "No, bring him back. We love him."
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I mean, all right. You know, that's then us just putting our guilt, I guess, on imposing our guilt on things. But
like, you would be insulted, but apparently they said that they loved him. They thought he was hilarious.
Hey, that reminds me of really quick, you know, when that movie came out, Freaks, back in the day, like in the 30s, you know, where all these people, you know, who were deformed and stuff, and circus performers were in it, and people were so outraged saying, you know, how dare you, you know, that's such a poor representation, you're mocking them, you know, don't do things like this, blah, blah, and that community came out and said, we have no other way to work other than putting us in circuses and putting us in these movies. Like, there is no other work for us out there. So please stop imposing that, you know, righteousness on us.
Hey, I'm going to say, I used to read things about that all the time because I was so interested in, like, okay, so it's like, yeah, you know, that was a big thing. There was a lot of abuse going on, but not always to the case. So it's like, what else could these people do in that time period? Because we know now, like, a lot of people are more accepting. Even, like, I know this is odd, but, like, even Walmart is super about, like, hiring people with, like, say, disabilities or where they couldn't work in a normal setting, about employing them and finding some job for them to do, which, so I'll say, like, hats off to Walmart for that, because they do make a point of trying to do that. But it's like, you have to think back then, when that wasn't, like, acceptable at all for them, and people were a lot more gung-ho to be like, oh, stop and stare and be disgusted type thing. What would they do? You know, you don't have, you didn't have the same kind of welfare back then. You didn't have the same kind of, like, disability payments back then. You didn't have the same, it's like, this was their income. So it's hard when people get insulted for you, but you're going, hey, dude, this is my bread and butter. Please don't take my bread and butter away.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Like, and it's interesting, like, looking back and thinking about those type of events. So I always just thought that was a kind of like neat fun fact with the movie Freaks. But yeah, so 2 points before we move on. Yes, so I'm excited for the Shang-Chi movie. Unfortunately, it's had to stop production, which everything had to because of the COVID-19 outbreak. But it is going to be interesting to finally see this character and this demographic represented, you know, because Shang-Chi should be essentially, you know, that version of, say, Black Panther, right? You know, where Asian people can see themselves on screen and see a superhero movie that is solely about them, you know, instead of them just being a side character or being like, say, Mantis and being, you know, kind of infantized, I think is the like word. So
like on that point really quick, not to interrupt, but it's like you do kind of look back and okay, I love Marvel, right?
Yeah.
I love Marvel, but we can always criticize because that's how we get better. But you just think almost every single one of them is a white dude, right? And if you do have and you are still getting like, say, Black main characters now, right? Which is great. You know, you have Black Panther and you have War Machine. You know, you have
Sam Wilson.
like Falcon. Why do they call him Hawk? Falcon. I always do that. I always get my birds mixed up. But you have Falcon, and I love Falcon, right? And you're starting to get the representation there. But when you do think back to, like, for the Asian demographic, you have Mantis and what's his name from Doctor Strange. He's great.
Wong.
You know, though they're great, but they are pushed aside as the side character or the comic relief, but not really like a firm, like they are a hero in their own right. Even if we love them, obviously we love them, but you know, you don't have that main representation. And I think that's been a big point throughout the years. And I am glad that now, like, I remember growing up, you know, it was very much like raised and saw everywhere about making sure not to racially stereotype African Americans or Hispanic people, but then people would happily make fun of Asian people, but nobody blinked an eye at that. So it is nice that finally we're getting kind of caught up with them where they can get the right representation, and that was why Crazy Rich Asian, that movie was such a big deal. Because a lot of people said, you know, we had never got to have our full movie, like to have that kind of representation, and I thought that was really good.
Well, that's why I also love that Parasite won an Oscar. Not, you know, it was a fantastic movie and should have won regardless. Like, that's the thing. I don't think that's a pity win at all. That movie's amazing, you know, but I also love that because it was like, yeah, like, you know, it's always, you know, a freaking movie about, like, a white lead or, you know, whatever. Like, even last year, really quick, one last thing, Green Book won, right? And the two characters were Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen, right? And the movie is about Mahershala Ali's character. He's the main character, but yet he was nominated for a supporting character, and Viggo Mortensen was nominated for the lead character. And it's like, what sense did that make?
But he was the main character.
Exactly. People are like, the movie was about him. Like, it was about him.
Yeah. You know? I think it's a good point when people make the argument, like, oh, there's not, like, I'm trying to find the word for it, like a biasness for that, right? Because a lot of people have made that point, but when you sit back and you go, hey, this dude is the main character in his own movie and he got nominated for a supporting role, but somebody else got the main character, like there's something not quite right with that. That don't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't, but at least Mahershala Ali did win the award. But and by the way, circling everything back around, yes, I love Scoot McNairy in All Hail the King. Love him. But
for a obsession with you.
Yes, exactly.
I fucking called it.
But let's move on. I'm going to take number 3, and my last 2 picks are actually from TV shows, and the third one is going to be Jessica Jones' mother in the 2nd season. I don't know if you ever watched the second season of Jessica Jones, but in it, her mother is essentially kind of like the main villain. She is also kind of superpowered from an accident. Like, okay, so in the first season of Jessica Jones, it's like you're led to believe that Jessica is the only survivor of the car crash. Well, then you find out in the second season, her mother was a survivor, but kept in a facility, experimented on, yada yada, and she's like this really like loose cannon, right? She is just so angry, and she kills all these people. I mean, you find out at some point through the flashbacks that she killed a boyfriend of Jessica Jones, but, you know, Jessica Jones didn't know at the time because she didn't know that her mother was even alive. Like, all of this crazy crap, essentially, with the whole thing. And I just remember being so bored by season 2 that it was a struggle for me to even continue with it. I didn't think that and I also hated that they brought her back in that capacity. I don't know if that's something that they ever did in the comic or they just decided to do it in the show, but I hate when it's like, you know, you have this character and a loved one has died and they, you know, obviously are, you know, have always thought fondly back of that character. And now it's like, oh no, but they were alive this whole time and now they're bad. And now all those great memories that you had with your mother are kind of thrown to the wayside because now she's an evil villain that you have to kind of take down. And I hate that. I hate that. And so I didn't like that aspect at all in the show. I didn't like the tension that it put on Jessica and Trish because at the end, spoiler alert, Trish kills Jessica Jones's mother because she's unstoppable and she's ridiculous. And it's like she kept killing people and she was essentially like an unstoppable force. And Jessica was all pissed and Trish is like, you were never going to do it. Like, I had to do that, you know? Yeah. And it's just, I hated it. The actress, I just didn't think did a good job in that role. There was nothing compelling about it. I absolutely hated that villain. So yeah, Jessica Jones' mom from season 2 of Jessica Jones.
You know, I was going to say that point about, oh, they have all these good memories and then they bring them back and they tarnish it, right? And then they die again. Like, I hate that. Like, and I know, like, especially Disney has done the dead mother trope a long time, but I actually enjoy the dead parent trope because it is such good character development for, like, you can look fondly on it, right? But
yeah.
As say an example is freaking Supernatural. The whole thing was Dean and Sam loved their mother, right? And they had such hard feelings against their dad, right? But but then as you go on, like with John Winchester, sorry. You know, you realize, okay, he had to do a lot, right? And he was stressed out. He wasn't originally the hunter, you know, and it was all about, you know, avenging their mother's death. And you realize, okay, he kind of has a redemption, right? But they brought back their mother and tarnished everything. She was a bitch. Like,
I remember that.
Yeah, like Dean and Sam, like I loved, especially Dean being the older brother and being able to remember their mother and the Hey Jude song, and you know it was so touching, right? And like the love of like what he said certainly had, but then in Supernatural they brought her back and she was a bitch. You know, it really tarnished the feelings they had for their mother, where they couldn't even have those good memories, and then I think she dies again. Like I don't know, I just didn't like it, and you go, man, okay, she wasn't this great ethereal angel like we thought, which I think is realistic, but to bring them in just to do that, I feel like it's just shooting you in the heart for no reason. So having not seen Jessica Jones really at all, but hearing what you said about season 2, I find that completely understandable. Like, why? I get it. Like, oh, storytelling, you know, she's back. But I don't know. You could have brought in someone else. Why you gotta bring in, like, a dead character? You know, why the mother? It just seems pointless. It feels like when people run out of ideas and they're like, it's kind of like whenever I was younger and I started writing, right? and on Quizilla back in the day. Yeah. And I was gaining traction because people were like, oh, I really like these fan fictions, right? But I would end it with a cliffhanger every single time because I thought that was interesting. And I remember one word of advice, somebody said, hey, I really love your stories, but, you're going to lose people if you do a cliffhanger at everything, because a cliffhanger, just for the sake of cliffhanger, isn't, it gets boring, or it gets disinteresting, or it gets irritating. And I always remembered that and was like, that's a really good point. But when you think about, oh, they just did it for interesting's sake, it's not interesting. It's sort of like, oh, for the gasp and awe, but not really for the true story writing.
Yeah, and I do think that it was kind of hard for Jessica Jones's, the show to kind of live up to having a villain like Kilgrave in the first season, but I just disliked the mother completely. As you said, you described it perfectly, even as someone who hasn't seen the show. As you described it with Supernatural, that's exactly what it is. That is exactly why I disliked Jessica Jones's mom in season 2.
I don't know. It just seems, pointless. Like, I get it. But you basically just made an evil version, older version of Jessica Jones. Like, that's it. Like, you were like, I don't know. It's kind of like, oh man, I almost said it, but I think it's your number 1. What, the show? Okay, the show that you're going to do for number 1, does it start with an F?
No. An F?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Like,
no.
Okay, so it's not Flash.
No, I was gonna maybe put Savitar from season 3, but I was like, I don't even want to waste my breath.
I was going to say, in Flash you had, this can go in the honorable mentions, where you're like, oh, who's the villain? Oh, it's Flash himself. Yeah, older Flash. Different, hey, you, Flash. But to me, that's kind of like Jessica Jones, like hearing about the mother. It's like you just have an older, evil Jessica Jones. Like, that's it. Yeah, that's just, I don't know, it's lazy.
It is lazy. It's 100% lazy. By the way, really quick, I was looking, so I had something that I was going to put as my number 1, but I feel like I'm going to change it, and it's going to be a little controversial, but let's move on to number 2. Brittany, what is your number 2? And you better not take us away like you did last week with the Green Mile. I'm still mad that wasn't the number 1. I'm like, I feel like shit. Mine was completely not even, like, didn't even compare.
On this is so, the last podcast we did top 10 saddest movies, and my number 2, which was my number 1, was The Green Mile. And Tia was like, oh, I need to see this movie. And I know she did too, because she liked the plot, but she also, there's an actor she said it. And so she watched it, and she's texting me like, fuck you. This shit. One. I'm telling you, The Green Mile makes me ugly cry. I told Aaron about it. I was like, oh, Tia watched Green Mile for the first time. He goes, what the fuck did you do to her? Why would you do that? Why would you do that to her?
Which, by the way, Logan was number 1, and I do think that's a pretty sad movie. But yeah, no, the actor that she's talking about is Sam Rockwell. And yeah, I went and watched The Green Mile. I was like, I have nothing to watch today. Let me check this out. Yeah, I ugly cried at the end when he's like, I don't want to feel the world so ugly or something. Everyone's just so ugly to each other. I'm so tired. I'm like, no.
I'm tired, boss. I'm mostly tired of people being ugly to one another. That's how it goes.
And they're all crying. When he's being put to death. And I'm just like, no, I can't.
Oh, I know, even saves the warden's wife.
Oh my god. Alright, we need to stop. I'm gonna fucking ugly cry right now.
It's one of those movies that when you lay in bed at night and go, man, today was a really good day, and then you remember The Green Mile.
Then you remember that they freaking put him to death, and it's like, you bitch.
Oh my god, I'm crying, but like laughing tears. I'm gonna go with Ultron for my number 2 and number 1, like for me number 1. But it's because okay, when I first saw it, I loved the movie, right? Because I love Transformers. I love a robotic villain. And I was like, this is so good. But then I watched it like 3 or 4 times in a row, and I realized that was a really bad decision because I was going there like every day after work, like oh, I just want to go see a movie because Tia taught me the joys of seeing a movie by yourself, and I really enjoy watching movies by myself now, especially with an empty theater where I can put my feet up. But because we don't got those fancy theaters with you and your fancy reclining seats. But I go with that because one, Ultron is such a huge villain in the Marvel cinematic, like not cinematic, in general, the Marvel comic universe. Ultron's supposed to be like Thanos, right? He's supposed to be like the end all be all. And for me, I guess they could have added him later. They made it almost too cartoony, I guess. Like Ultron, I get it. Like I get him being able to basically making this AI that has got to see the world and realize that, hey, humans can't learn, I got to do this. But I feel like that's almost like a cop-out in its own because I truly think that if an AI was able to see the world, but they're also able to see the good and the bad. Oh, random side note, really quick. I remembered what I was going to say a second ago. What I was going to say was you led back to the Loki point, right? That was such a good point with him dying, and at least, it helped his character for having that end part with him be Odin. I was going to say, in the words of Bob Ross, we don't have mistakes, we have happy accidents. But I finally remembered what I was going to say. I was going to say it was a happy accident. But, but with Ultron, I feel like I feel like an AI that is completely coming from scratch and would be able to see the good and the bad. I feel like it's too much to say, oh, well, it only see the death and destruction. It sees nothing good. It's got to be like, I just don't think Ultron had the capacity to be this good person like he thought. To be like, oh, I'm going to make the world better. It's like, why does the AI even care? Why does it care? And I think it was because Tony was trying to make wasn't he trying to make a defense system? I think he was trying.
His whole thing was that he wanted to create Ultron because he said that the world needed as you said, a defense system, and he even does bring it back up in Endgame to Steve Rogers, where he was like, I told you we needed this, but you said, if we fail, we'll fail together. Well, we failed, buddy. He was like, we failed, and we weren't even together. He says that to Steve, and he refers back to Ultron, where he was like, that's what I wanted. I wanted this. But Ultron ultimately ended up having a mind of his own, and, wanted to then destroy humanity.
At least I gave birth to Vision. At least there was that. But I don't know. I found him, I liked him. That's the thing. He was a bad villain, but I liked him. And it did give us Scarlet Witch. It gave us, what's his name?
Quicksilver.
Quicksilver. I wanted to say Silver Bullet. But, I mean, I guess
that would be kind of cool. But I think Age of Ultron was it's certainly not my favorite movie, right? There's a lot that I don't like about that movie, but there are things that I do like. As you said, it gave birth to Vision. There's some great Steve Rogers and Natasha moments there. You have Quicksilver and everything. So you had decent moments, and Age of Ultron definitely set up for a lot of shit. But freaking, what was I going to say? Yeah, Ultron had the potential to be a great villain. Whatchamacallit, by the way, I looked up in the comics. Did you know that his creator in the comics is Hank Pym? I guess because they hadn't introduced Ant-Man at that point. What'd you say?
I feel like I've heard that before.
Yeah, so he created Hank Pym, and in the comics, he almost has it says a familial relationship with Hank.
Yeah.
Which we kind of saw them try to do that in Age of Ultron, like, you know, him calling Tony father or something, and, you know, Tony like, oh, son, you break my heart, or something like that, you know? But ultimately, it was just, like, it wasn't conceived very well. I kind of didn't like Ultron's design. It was a little strange for me. I wanted it to almost be a little bit more mechanical. And then he tried to be a little funny sometimes. And I thought that was awkward.
Pinocchio.
Yeah, he was talking about Pinocchio. He's talking to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and he can't think of what children are called. He's like little humans, and they're like children. He's like, yes, ha 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 ha, children. And then he's like talking about church and. What'd you say?
It's disconcerting.
Yeah, it was very weird. It was very weird. I was like, I don't want you near me. I'm afraid of you touching me. Not even like us in a fight. I just don't want you to even touch me. There was something creepy about him. Not in a good way, but I know.
Whoa.
I know, but I thought that they could have done so much more with this villain. He was a very forgettable villain. And when you look at the Avengers, like the movies, the Avengers, it's like you had a great first one. Infinity War and Endgame were fantastic. But Age of Ultron, to me, was just a forgettable villain. I didn't see any sort of, I don't know, just Ultron, his whole thing, he gets turned on, and he automatically kills freaking Jarvis, which it's like, you bitch. He right away kills fucking Jarvis, and it's like, he learns everything and ultimately decides right then and there that everything that he's seen is horrible. I do want to say I did kind of like him pointing out shit to the Avengers, like when they're all sitting there kind of like having this joyous moment, and he's like, you're all murderers. He is like, you all kill people. And I did like that.
I did too. Because you have to, it's funny, DC's all gritty and like, oh, but we don't murder anyone. And Marvel's like, oh yeah, we're a little happier, but we murder the shit out of people.
Someone pointed out it was being funny because they were like, oh, Marvel's the kid version. And they did this compilation of like freaking Steve Rogers throwing someone into the propellers of a freaking jet. All the times they shot some, like all these different things. And it's like, yeah, lighthearted. Still killing people. That's like a scene from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he's like, cool, still murder, but cool.
It makes me think of a compilation of all the murder, but played to, what's it called, Mr. Blue Sky? Like, just, oh my gosh, somebody needs to make that, please.
Oh my god. So yeah, but Ultron, I definitely think deserves to be on this list because he could have had potential. He could have been a good villain, but I just don't think that he really was. He kind of was, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was, though, kind of a visionary similar to Thanos. Like, Thanos wanted to right the wrongs of humanity by essentially taking out half of humanity and rebuilding, and Ultron wanted to kind of do the same thing, only he wanted to take out pretty much every single human. But he was kind of had that same sort of vision as Thanos did. The execution was just poor. I mean, his whole thing was lift a piece of land so high that it replicates a meteor when it drops back down.
Like the extinction event.
Yeah, but he was very and then he was my vision. Definitely.
That was a little creepy. When he's like,
that's what I'm saying. It was creepy. even the way he like acted to the one doctor nurse and everything, it was creepy. It was so creepy. And then when he was talking to like Wanda, where he was like, "You'll break them from the inside out," and I'm like, "Stop talking." So creepy.
What got me too is I had to look it up because he sounded so similar to Tony in some aspects that I think to me it was also weird because it was like imagining a very bad Tony, like a bad Tony,
Yeah.
because he was made from Tony. And, you do have him calling him father. I felt like he picked up a lot from Tony's mannerisms. And to see him kind of in that creepy way, like next to regular Tony, was kind of creepy.
It was creepy, but it is weird because, Tony didn't just create Ultron on his own. I mean, freaking Bruce Banner was there too, and Bruce Banner gets none of the flack that Tony does. It's like, but Bruce Banner, like, helped him with that whole shit. But, I did like, again, I liked Vision coming out because Vision was kind of like the neutral, because Vision also didn't see like the world as good and bad, but he had more of that like, humans should be given at least a chance to try. So yeah, Ultron, definitely number 2 here. We are down to the number 1 on our top 10 worst villains of comic book, movie, and TV show. I'm going to go through our list so far before I name off mine. So we have Kalish from Doctor Strange, Diamondback from Luke Cage, Venom from Spider-Man 3, not Venom 2018, Lex Luthor from Batman vs. Superman, Whiplash from Iron Man 2, the Elf Dude from Thor 2, the Mandarin from Iron Man 3, Jessica Jones' mom in the second season, Ultron from Age of Ultron. I'm going to do number 1, and Brittany, I'm ready. I'm going to do a bit of a controversial pick.
Oh, no.
And I'm going to do a disclaimer beforehand. I like this... you ready? I like this character. That's the thing, is I like this character, but he wasn't a good villain, because then he turned out to not be a villain at all, and it was a little disappointing when he turned out to not be the villain.
I thought you were going to say.
What'd you say?
I know who you're going to say now.
It is going to be Talos from Captain Marvel.
Yes! Yes! Oh my gosh.
So, Captain Marvel, which I think was a better movie than people give it credit for. I mean, again, we always say it certainly wasn't the best movie, but I actually enjoyed it. I have watched it a few times within the past few months, and I sit there and I go, you know what, I liked it. Like, fuck it. It's the same thing how I felt with Venom. I was like, I don't care. I like this movie. Like, hashtag, don't give a shit. But,
sorry.
Exactly. But when Captain Marvel was first, promoted, it, was promoted that the Skrulls are the bad guys. And even in the comics, Skrulls are the bad guys. They're bad. And Talos was certainly that. I mean, they're invading Earth. I mean, he even had that fight with Samuel Jackson's character, Nick Fury, and it was bad. It was like, ooh, and you never know because they could transform into other people, so they were crafty that way. And Ben Mendelsohn, who plays Talos, can play a very good villain. He has the voice for it, And you're sitting there and you're like, as you're watching it, you're like, Talos is such a good villain. He's capturing Carol Danvers. He's really just a very, like, imposing force to look out for. And then you find out that he's not really the bad guy, not in this story. The
Teddy bear.
The Kree are those who are bad. Of course, Ronan comes back, and we all know Ronan's a villain, and Ronan's definitely a good villain. Although in the comics, this kind of turns into an anti-hero, which is interesting. But Talos, as you said, he's a big teddy bear. He's a family man. He just wants to get his wife and child back, and he wants a good home for his people, and he's willing to work with Carol and point out all of the bad things that have happened to her that she's unaware of because the Kree have erased her memories. And I did like how it tricked you into thinking that the Kree were good when you're sitting there going, wait, Ronan is a Kree. But then kind of shows you no, the Kree are actually assholes this whole time. And I did like that. I have nothing bad with how the Kree were portrayed. And certainly, the way they pointed out was, just like humans, not all humans are bad, not all humans are good. And the same thing goes with the Skrulls. Not all Skrulls are bad, but not all Skrulls are good. There's still bad Skrulls out there. But I wanted Talos to be a bad Skrull. So
I did too. And, he even points out, it's like they almost knew that, hey, we started out bad. And you could tell he's a leader, right? He's the leader of this group. He probably was a military leader, wouldn't you say? That he goes, oh, we all got blood on our hands, saying, hey, I've done things that I'm not proud of, too. I'm I don't want you to be remorseful. I want you to be I want you to be like Ronan. I wanted you to be a villain. You had, the hot accent and everything.
It's I did these things, and I'm not sorry for it because it was for the good of my people. I'd do it again. And it's as you said, it's he had the voice for it, right? His voice, you're sitting there, you're yeah, 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 yeah. In that one scene when he's, throwing frickin', Nick Fury around he's a rag doll, you're yeah, he's so strong and shit, and he was pissed that one of his fellow Skrulls had been killed, so you're thinking oh, now the humans are an enemy of the Skrulls. But no, they didn't go in that direction.
Okay, unpopular opinion on this. Here's my theory. Make him a leader, but you kill off the family, and that makes him a villain, because
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, just kill the family. I know that sounds bad, but pull a Cable. Pull a Cable. He was halfway decent, and then he was willing to kill a kid because the kid grows up to kill his family. I mean,
make him an anti-hero, if anything.
Yeah.
They work with the Skrulls because the Skrulls aren't as bad as the Kree, or at least they all have a common enemy with the Kree, but you still can't trust Talos because, he'll still be there to kind of be crafty and shit. But we see that clearly didn't happen because, and in the end credit for Spider-Man Far From Home, he's clearly been still working with Nick Fury.
Well, what gets me too is, so you have that, right? But what also gets me is he was on the villain part, right? Mm-hmm. When he has Carol Danvers at first, right? Mm-hmm. He has Captain Marvel. And he has her at the beginning, and he's doing, that whole, mind thing to, see into her head. I found that such a good villain thing, when he's almost, encouraged, just a little more, just a little, that.
Very intrusive.
Very intrusive. Very, I'm into that, right? But I'm that's just some hidden kinks are coming out here.
Yeah.
but for Talos, I don't know. To me, I want to pretend he's a villain.
That's how I feel about it because, again, Ben Mendelsohn is a fantastic actor. When he was playing that role in a villain capacity, it was fantastic. Right? I fucking loved it. And then when they kind of went in the direction that they did, that was when I was oh. But the thing was, it's even in that movie, it's there wasn't really, say, a villain. I mean, I know the Kree were villains, but it's okay, so you had Talos, right? Yeah. And he could have been a great villain, but he ended up not being a villain. And then you bring Ronan back in. You don't really give Ronan the freedom to be the villain that we all know he is. We all know how Ronan can be. And I had heard that there were plans to make Ronan be in the movie more, and then they decided to have it just at the end, which I was you And then
I feel I got blue balled.
And then essentially, I think like the real villain was supposed to be, I think, Jude Law's character, which I didn't care about at all. Like he was so like at the end when he's like, "Now you can fight me, Carol, with all your strength, 1-on-1. Don't use your powers, so you can finally prove to me." And she's like, "Mother effer, I don't gotta prove shit to you, you weak ass boy."
I love that when she hits him because you can tell he's like her because he knows like in hand-to-hand combat he can get her, and he's like trying to go to her like, "Oh, you don't need to fight," and she's like, "Bitch, these powers are a part of me now. I'm gonna like literally fuck you with them."
Well, that's what I liked about, because he was trying to make her feel like belittled, like, "Oh, you know, you're not good enough unless you can beat me hand to hand, you know, blah, blah, blah." And it's like, as you said, my powers are a part of me. Why wouldn't I use them? And I don't need to prove to you that I can beat you in a hand-to-hand combat. Like, what are you talking about? I don't have to prove shit, which I do, though, think at this point she could have beat him hand to hand. I mean... Yeah. She did headbutt Thanos. Like,
she did headbutt Thanos, right? I agree. I agree.
You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah. So I know that Talos, like, and that's the thing is that I like the character. It's not one of those situations where I dislike Talos. I very much like Talos because I very much like Ben Mendelsohn. I love the part where he goes, "Oh, I can go back to being your director. I loved his blue eyes." And it's like essentially talking about himself.
Like, it's like such a thing. Like, you know what? I'm into that.
Yeah.
Like, I love that they appreciate what they're turning into, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So it's like I like Talos as a character. I just would have really liked him if he was a villain, because that's the problem sometimes with Marvel movies. They don't have long-lasting villains. It's like they've only played the long game with Loki and Thanos. And it's like, let's play the long game with others. Like, you're going to go into another phase. We need villains. And the Skrulls are terrifying because they could literally be anyone. And that would have been awesome to see. Like, it really would have. But who knows? Maybe they do that. They kill off his family, and it's because of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Fury or something, and, you know, that suddenly is like, "Oh, you guys were our friends all this time, and we helped you out. Well, now we're going to fuck you, motherfucker."
You know what I thought of? You either die a villain or live long to become the hero.
Yeah. Oh my god. But yeah, Brittany, we did an amazing job with our list, I think, today. I'm really crossing my fingers that this thing freaking like records. And it's all good because this is a really awesome list. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying good luck everybody else.
Good luck everybody else. But Brittany, before I let you go, let us know where we can find you, what we can look forward to, and all that good stuff. You know the deal.
I know the shindig, but I don't
know.
You can find me on Twitch at Itty Bitty Brit. I've been streaming a lot of vampires, Bloodline the Masquerade. It's such a long name that I get messed up every time. We're basically playing a vampire that was embraced by her sire, but apparently her sire broke the rules by doing so. He is murdered. We are thrusted upon this like mafia underground vampire kind of clan where there's a lot of what's the word for it? A lot of infighting. There's the masquerade, which means that you're not supposed to let humans know what you're doing, and basically keeping up appearances for the day walking people. But it's been fun. I'm running a poll right now to see what we're going to play along with it. It's between Ori and the Blind Forest or Dream Daddy, which I kind of want to play. I don't know if you've heard about it, Tia. Have you heard about Dream Daddy?
No, you know me. I don't hear about any of these games nowadays.
It was a popular game. Like, it was huge, but I never played it, and I haven't seen much of it be played. Basically, you play a single father with a daughter, and you are trying to find yourself a dream daddy. A bunch of single fathers who are big and muscular, and you're trying to woo them. It is a dating simulator game. I really want to play.
I was going to say, Brittany, I feel like a lot of your games lately are getting oddly sexual.
No, maybe, yes. Maybe. I mean, no.
She can't even lie. You hear that, guys? She can't even lie.
I know, but you can find me there. We're just having a lot of fun. My second monitor's coming in. It's going to make chat a little bit easier to see. And my last part to my not webcam, my actual camera is coming in. So we're going to have some upgrades to that. And you can follow me on Twitter at ittybittyBrit0. And that's a great way to keep in touch with me, see what we're playing next, if there's a schedule change, or anything Twitch related, geek, nerdy, anything else, you can find it there. And when I start eventually trying to cosplay again, you'll find those there too.
If there's anything to cosplay too. No, I'm joking. But yeah, guys, everyone, please make sure that you check all of that out. Hopefully you all enjoyed our new our new recording, device. I can't even talk right now, but that you appreciate all of this good stuff, because we definitely tried hard to find a different platform that will have better sound quality. So hopefully this worked out all right, but make sure you check all that out that Brittany was just saying. And of course you can check out all of my stuff as well. I just released a new Tea Time with Tia where I talked about Most Dangerous Game because it was absolutely phenomenal. And I also have a written review for both Apple TV's Defending Jacob, which is really turning out well, and a written review for the first episode of Penny Dreadful City of Angels. So make sure you check that out all at geekvibesnation.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all under Geek Vibes Nation. And I am also on Twitter and Instagram at TFAB. So make sure you check that out. Brittany, stay on the line for just 2 seconds after I stop recording, just so that we can chit-chat for just a second. But everyone, thank you so much for staying with us, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. See ya!
Have a great day, everyone.